Hey guys, in today's video we're going to run through exactly what ports the Rev Robotics Control Hub has and what it does on your robot. Alright, let's jump in. So the Rev Robotics Control Module actually does a couple of different things for us. It gives us a place to plug in motors, servos, and sensors, but it also allows us to use it as a router so that your phone with its controller can connect to it. So I know back in the day when I was doing robots, we had to actually plug in a phone to a control module, and then we had a bunch of other control modules plugged into that main control module just to make everything work. So Rev Robotics essentially took all those different control modules and the phone and put them into one component that is easy to connect to and work with. They also added in the online programming environment, so you can just connect to a specific IP address which is associated with the robot, and then you can actually program it and download it and run it very conveniently, which personally I think is a great solution for this. So we're going to go through the different ports that are on the controller and talk about a diagram that Rev Robotics provided us. All right, let's talk about the ports on the control hub. So right here we have the battery port, and you can see that there's two of them. One of them will be used for the actual battery supply, and another one you can use if you're going to plug in an expansion hub. So if you have like a ton of motors or sensors or servos on your robot, you may need to add an expansion hub, but that's completely optional. Right below that we have the motors. So this control hub can support 4 DC motors right here, and they also have the little motor encoders. So the motor encoders are completely optional. The motors will run just fine without them. It's just if you want to use the encoders to control like how many revolutions the motor is actually doing, you're going to have to plug a wire both into the encoder here and an encoder on the back of the motor. And then below that we have the servos, so you can just plug the servos right in here. You have a 5-volt power supply. This 5-volt power supply is used for sensors or possibly LEDs if you have LEDs on your robot. And then over on this side, we have analog, digital, and I2C, and as well as RS485. So the analog is set up to handle sensors that have a range of values. So for example, a distance sensor has a range of values. It's going to give you the distance, probably in centimeters, from maybe 5 centimeters to 250 centimeters. So you're going to want some range there. You also have digital right here. So you have a bunch of digital ports. These digital ports are Boolean values, or they're true or false, or 1 or 0. So for example, a touch sensor would be a digital sensor, because it is either pressed or it is not pressed. So it's true or false. The I2C is another connector for sensors. And there's a couple sensors that you can plug in here. We'll look into that more later. And this RS485 right here, that's actually for connecting to other control hubs. So if you remember over here where I said you can plug in your power supply to another control hub, well, this power supply only is supplying it power. It's not actually transferring data. It's not like controlling it. So if you add an expansion hub on here, you'll actually need to plug in both the power connector over and the RS485 cable. And that'll set it up where this control hub can actually control the expansion hub. Okay. Modern Robotics did actually provide us with an example of what can be plugged into the control hub, so let's go check that out. As we can see here, they have the 12-volt battery supply with a kill switch, which I would highly recommend, plugged into the power supply. And then they also have two different types of 12-volt motors plugged into the motor ports. And generally speaking, you should be able to plug in pretty much any 12-volt motor you'd like to. Some motors probably aren't going to have the encoders, so that'll be a downside if you're trying to use encoders and the motors don't have support for that. They also have a servo plugged in right here in one of the servo ports, and they have a potentiometer plugged into the analog port here. Potentiometer is just a dial that you can rotate and will give you a range of numbers. So maybe between 0 and 100, for example, and as you rotate it, the numbers will increase until they hit 100, and then you can rotate it backwards and they'll go back to 0. So you could use that for changing like the intensity of a light or how bright a light is. And then you have a magnetic limit switch and touch sensor, which are both digital sensors. So the magnetic limit switch is just going to return a value of 1 if there is a magnetic field close by, and then a value of 0 if there isn't one close by. And then a touch sensor, same thing. If it's pressed, it will return a value of 1, and if it's not pressed, it will return a value of 0. And then we have a few I2C sensors right here. So the I2C is just designed to handle more data, generally speaking, than the digital and analog. So the analog is just doing a range of values from 0 to 100. Digital is literally 1 or 0, so 2 values. And then I2C can actually send like all types of data over it. So if you have more complicated sensors, like the color sensor, for example, is picking up on the red light, the blue light, and the green light that it's looking at. So if it's looking at a blue object, it's picking up all those different light colors and then sending them back to the actual control hub to process. So I2C is the protocol for actually handling that data being sent over the wire. So more complicated sensors are going to be plugged into the I2C. And this is a little bit challenging right off the bat because there are some examples where, so for here you have a distance sensor which is plugged into I2C. There's also distance sensors that you can plug into analog because technically when you're measuring distance, it's going to be a range. So it just depends on the type of sensor that you have that will determine what type of port you need to plug it into and the way you need to program it. So this is an overview of their wiring guide. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I left a few links in the description below that I hope will be able to help you out even more. There's one for a video from Rev Robotics on how to use the Control Hub. There's another one for FTC on how to use the Control Hub, and there's also a CAD file download as well. Also, I would love to hear if you guys are having any challenges with getting the Control Hub set up, or if you have any questions about the actual ports on it. I'll be doing more videos shortly on how to actually wire everything up and program it, so you have a full step-by-step process of how to actually set that stuff up. So hopefully that'll be easy shortly. And then remember to like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video. Helps me out a whole bunch, helps me do more videos. And then hit the bell notification if you want updates for when videos come out. All right, I'll see you guys next time.